The morning light of Maple Creek crept softly over rooftops, washing the small Georgia town in the pale gold of another predictable day. Mist hung low along the edges of the road, curling around porch railings and picket fences like breath that refused to fade. From a small duplex on Juniper Street came the smell of coffee and starch, Denise Carter's morning ritual before work. Her son, Elijah, sat by the window sketching a row of buildings in his notebook, the eraser worn to a nub. He was 15, quiet to the point of invisibility, with eyes that never... Quiet precision, her voice low, her stride deliberate. Ward had only been principal for 3 months, long enough to sense the tension under Maple Creek's polished surface. She had once fought her battles in courtrooms. Years ago, she'd been a civil rights attorney in Atlanta, known for her composure and intellect. But the grind, the bureaucracy, the endless appeals had hollowed her out. She'd left the law to rebuild, to start where change begins, schools. As she passed a classroom, she caught sight of Elijah through the glass window. He sat alone, posture straight, eyes down. Something in that boy's stillness tugged at her, a kind of quiet resilience she recognized too well. She made a mental note to learn his name. By afternoon, the sun pressed against the classroom blinds, striping the room in gold and shadow. The class turned, the scrape of chairs echoing. Elijah blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. "Ma'am, you heard me," she said, smoothing her cardigan. "We've had too many distractions lately. You'll be fine near the back." There were no distractions. He never spoke out of turn. He barely spoke at all. But the tone, cold, performative, told him it wasn't about distraction. It was about position. He rose slowly, keeping his eyes low as a few students exchanged smirks. One boy whispered, "Guess we know the seating chart now." Another laughed. Elijah walked to the back and sat quietly, opening his notebook as if nothing had changed. From the corner of the room, he hesitated. It was fine. She studied him. "You sure?" He nodded again, setting his bag down, heading to his room. When he closed the door, she heard the quiet sound of him turning the lock. In her office that night, Principal Ward sat alone, scrolling through staff rosters, disciplinary records, student reports. Her pen hovered over a page labeled Minor Conduct Incidents, Pending. There, beside a few vague entries, she saw the name again, E. Carter. The air in the room felt heavier suddenly. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a new resolve. She knew that name now. She knew the look in that boy's eyes. She'd seen it, swallowed hard, stood slowly and gathered his books. The movement felt like wading through wet cement. As he walked down the aisle, someone muttered, "Guess he learned his place." Laughter followed, quiet but sharp. He reached the back and sat down, setting his books carefully on the desk, as if to keep them from trembling. The class continued. Mrs. Hargrove's voice cut through the air, smooth, measured, triumphant. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing at all. But the phone that had been tilted toward him captured everything. The silence, the humiliation, the moment he lowered his head and blinked hard against the sting in his eyes. By lunch, the principal's office smelled faintly of paper and rain when the staff filed in. The blinds were drawn, the morning sun reduced to thin, unforgiving lines of light that cut through the tension in the room. Teachers stood clustered like uneasy jurors, eyes darting, whispers low and nervous. Mrs. Hargrove sat apart, her chin lifted in brittle defiance. At the center of it all stood Principal Ellen Ward, her posture calm but coiled. On her desk sat a laptop, the viral video paused mid-frame. Elijah's face stared back from the screen, eyes down, body folded into quiet shame. Ward took a long breath. Before anyone speaks, the principal's office smelled faintly of paper and rain when the staff filed in. The blinds were drawn, the morning sun reduced to thin, unforgiving lines of light that cut through the tension in the room. Teachers stood clustered like uneasy jurors, eyes darting, whispers low and nervous. Mrs. Hargrove sat apart, her chin lifted in brittle defiance. At the center of it all stood Principal Ellen Ward, her posture calm but coiled. On her desk sat a laptop, the viral video paused mid-frame. Elijah's face stared back from the screen, eyes down, body folded. Stay strong, brother. You're ruining your school. You're a hero. You're a liar. The contradictions spun in his head until they blurred into static. Denise tried to shield him from it, muting the TV when the tone shifted from sympathy to cynicism. But she could feel the tremors in her son's silence, the way he stared longer at the floor, the way his hand trembled when scrolling through comments. "Baby," she said softly one evening, "don't let them turn your pain into their entertainment." He looked at her, weary. "Then what do I do?" "Turn it into purpose." Meanwhile, at the school district headquarters, Principal Ellen Ward was summoned to a close. By the time she walked out of the building, a cluster of reporters was waiting by the steps. Questions shouted through the air. "Principal Ward, are you being removed? Did you overstep your authority? Do you support the students' legal claims?" Ward paused only once, her expression calm, voice cutting clean through the chaos. "I support the truth," she said and walked on. That clip aired on every major outlet within hours. The following weekend, Maple Creek divided itself in two. Outside the school, a peaceful protest gathered, hundreds of students, parents, and community members carrying signs. "Justice for Elijah. Equality isn't." In the distance, camera drones buzzed overhead. The story had outgrown him now. It belonged to everyone and no one. Later that night, Elijah sat on his bed sketching again. This time, he drew two figures, a boy and a woman, standing before a crumbling school building, holding blueprints for something new. Above them, he wrote a single word in bold strokes: rebuild. Meanwhile, in her dim apartment, Ellen Ward sat before her laptop, joining a live virtual panel hosted by a civil rights foundation she'd once worked with. The host introduced her as the principal because the truth was no longer theirs alone. It was out there, alive, unstoppable. "Would you like me to continue with Section 6? The turning point / showdown next, where public backlash intensifies. Ward faces a disciplinary hearing, and Elijah is invited to speak before the school board. The moment where both risk everything to confront the system head-on. The Monday after the protests, the halls of Maple Creek High were quieter than a church before confession. Lockers slammed softer, whispers hung heavier. The teachers who hadn't been suspended walked with uneasy smiles, their eyes flicking toward every corner like there might be a... Meanwhile, Ward sat in the district office facing a panel of 7 board members, all white, all visibly uncomfortable. They called it an administrative hearing, but it looked and felt like a trial. Superintendent Halvorson presided from the center. "Principal Ward, you've been accused of gross misconduct, unauthorized disciplinary action, and inciting public unrest. Do you have a statement before we deliberate?" Ward straightened her posture. Her voice was calm, but every word carried an undercurrent of conviction. Ward turned slightly toward Elijah's attorney, the faintest glint of mutual respect passing between them. 2 women on opposite sides of a storm, both holding their ground. That night, the news broke again. Principal suspension sparks federal inquiry. The next morning, a letter from the Office for Civil Rights arrived at the district's headquarters. It was terse and unmistakable. Formal investigation pending. The district scrambled. Halvorson issued a statement about procedural fairness and commitment. When he finished, he folded the paper, his hands steady. Tomorrow, he'd face the same people who once dismissed him. But this time, he wouldn't be alone. Ward, Holt, his mother, they'd be there. The truth would be there. And when he spoke, he wouldn't just be a student. He'd be a witness and a warning. The night of the board meeting, the Maple Creek Civic Auditorium pulsed with a kind of electricity usually reserved for verdicts and funerals. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the floor, packed shoulder to shoulder. A teacher followed, trembling but resolute. "I've taught here for 20 years. I've seen who gets praised and who gets punished. Elijah's not lying. We failed him. We failed a lot of students." Applause broke out, hesitant then growing. Halvorson struck his gavel again, but the sound couldn't drown the shifting tide. When it was Elijah's turn, the room fell utterly still. He rose slowly, unfolding the page he'd written the night before. The microphone seemed too tall for him at first. Ward rose quietly and adjusted it. The boy's voice grew firmer, deeper. I'm not angry. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to remind everyone. The back of the room is still part of the room, and we're done pretending that's good enough. A hush spread like snowfall. Thick, heavy, undeniable. Then applause. First a ripple, then a roar. People rose to their feet. Teachers, students, even a few parents who'd come skeptical found themselves clapping before they realized it. Halvorson's jaw. Holt rose from her seat. For the record, she announced clearly, the Carter family has filed an official civil rights complaint with the Department of Education. Copies have been sent to the State Attorney General's office and the press. Chaos bloomed. Reporters shouting, board members whispering frantically. Halvorson stood, face flushed. This meeting is adjourned. But no one heard him, because at that exact moment, a student from the back of the auditorium, a freshman, voice shaking, called out, Elijah, you made us proud. Another followed, then another, and suddenly the entire room was standing again, chanting as there was still tension, always would be, but it was no longer unspoken. It was named, studied, challenged. Elijah Carter became the name on everyone's tongue, but to him, fame was an uncomfortable fit. He never saw himself as a hero, just a kid who refused to disappear. After the hearing, reporters had chased him for weeks. Colleges sent early interest letters. Activist groups offered scholarships and speaking tours. He turned most of them down. Instead, Elijah started something smaller, something that would last. He founded Front Row, an after-school mentorship. She became a quiet symbol of courage in the district. Teachers who'd once played safe began pushing harder, rethinking discipline policies, curriculum choices, even the books they assigned. She was no longer feared. She was followed. But the biggest change was one she couldn't have predicted. Months later, the Department of Education released its findings. The report was damning. Multiple incidents of racial bias, grade manipulation, and systemic retaliation against whistleblowers. It was a story the nation. I used to think justice was something that happened in courtrooms, he began softly, that it needed lawyers or cameras or headlines. But I learned justice starts smaller than that, in how we treat each other when no one's watching. He looked over the sea of faces. Sometimes standing up means sitting down, refusing to move from where you belong. Sometimes it's just saying no with quiet dignity. His voice caught slightly. I want to thank those who didn't stay silent